I'm Brian Carrier from Basic Technology, and this is Section 2 of the Autopsy One-Day Training class, and we're going to talk about installation. The goal of this section is to talk about how to configure and install Autopsy in your lab. Here's the basic steps of installation. We're going to install Autopsy on each of the examiner's computers. We will then optionally install the multi-user cluster services, and then we'll configure each Autopsy client. To install Autopsy on Windows, it's pretty simple, and this needs to be done for both single-user and multi-user clusters. You'll download the MSI installer from our website. You can use the default installation values, and this will then put Autopsy in a folder on your computer. It will put it in a version-specific folder, which allows you to have multiple versions of Autopsy installed at the same time. This is important that if you want to be able to open up past cases without modifying the case, you should open it up with the same version of Autopsy you were using last. Otherwise, a newer version of Autopsy may try and upgrade that data and change the case to meet the current requirements of Autopsy. If you don't want that to happen, keep an old version around and open it up with the old version again. If you want to run Autopsy on Linux and Mac, you can, but it requires more steps, and we don't focus as much on these platforms. We focus mainly on Windows. But to do this, there is a text file. It's called Running Linux OS X. The basic flow of it is to install some dependency programs using the package management tool based on that platform. You'll install things like Java, the SleuthKit, and Photorec. You'll then download a zip file of Autopsy and expand it, and then run a script called Unix setup, and that will copy various files from those dependencies into Autopsy so that you can then launch Autopsy and it will find everything it needs. In the last section, we talked about how you can run Autopsy optionally in a multi-user cluster environment to allow for collaboration and automated analysis. So to have that kind of environment set up, you'll have to install some other services. There's a lot of details in the Autopsy documentation. We're not going to replicate those here, but the basic concepts, at least for the level of this class, is that you'll need at least 2 dedicated servers as well as a central storage repository. You'll put Postgres and ActiveMQ on one server. Postgres is a database. ActiveMQ is a messaging system that allows the computers to communicate back and forth. You'll put Solr, the text index, on the other server. And the key point here is to make sure that all of the Autopsy clients can access the central storage at the same UNC or drive letter path. Everyone in the cluster needs to be able to access the data at the same location to make this whole process work. If you are going down the multi-user collaborative environment, after you have your services set up, you go to each of the clients, you go to the options panel, and you enable multi-user cases, and you fill in things like the database and the Solr index host name and username and passwords. And there should be a test button for each of those to make sure that they are working and you didn't make a mistake by entering in the wrong host name or username. The central repository is a feature we talked about in the last section that allows you to make connections with past cases, as well as centrally manage hash sets and such things. If you want to configure Autopsy to use that, the first thing is to enable it. So you have to go to the options panel, choose central repository, and check the box to use the central repository. After that, you pick the database type. If you're doing a SQLite database, by default, it'll put a folder into your app data folder. That's okay. Then hit go, and you're all set. But you can change it if you want to. If you're using the Postgres database for a central repository, again, edit in host names, username, passwords, and hit OK, and those results will be saved. Other configuration you can do when you're doing an installation. We do support integrating in with Google and Microsoft for machine translation. We don't provide the API access. You have to have a key for that. The details for obtaining that are in our documentation. But if you are doing this, go to the options panel, go to the translations tab, pick your translation provider, enter in the credentials, and you can also change the language that you want to translate to if you want to translate to something other than English. There's other configuration that you need to do. Hash sets, keyword lists, other rules. We're going to deal with each of these as this course progresses, and we talk about dealing with hash hits and keyword lists. The things in this section are all about general purpose, things that are fairly easy. Again, we'll deal with more of configuration a bit later on as the course progresses.